It's Wisconsin Today. I'm Kate Archer-Kent. Catholics around Wisconsin celebrated Sunday Mass honoring their new Pope, Leo XIV. According to the Wisconsin Catholic Conference, there are 1.1 million Catholics in 5 dioceses in the state. We turn now to the Diocese of Madison. Bishop Donald J. Hying is here to reflect on the selection of Chicago-born Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost as the new Pope and what it means for the future of the Roman Catholic Church in Wisconsin. Bishop Hying, welcome to Wisconsin Today.
Hey, good morning. Thank you for having me on air.
What was it like at Sunday Mass? How are you celebrating the new Pope?
Yeah, so yesterday I celebrated Mass at our cathedral, St. Bernard's, and reflected on the wonder of having a new Pope, number one. Number two, the astonishing fact that he's an American from Chicago, a native White Sox fan, and also the choice of his name. So when a Pope chooses his papal name, he's always sending a message. So it's certainly a throwback to Pope Leo XIII, who was Pope of the Catholic Church in the latter part of the 19th century and was the first Pope to, in modern times, reflect on what is the gospel, what does the church have to say to social problems. So he was looking at the rapid rise of industrialization and workers being crammed into factories with unjust working conditions and unjust wages, and really saying the church has something to say about human dignity and freedom. So Pope Leo XIV has commented that he certainly wants to see the church engage in the world and really bring to the public square our pursuit of the common good and lifting up the dignity of the human person, and of course, for us as Catholics, proclaiming Jesus Christ, crucified and risen, as the source of our salvation.
We hear words like labels like moderate and centrist to describe the new Pope. What does it mean to be a moderate in the church, and how do you think that he might compare to the late Pope Francis?
Yeah, it's hard to, I know we often think in political terms, and the church, the gospel has political implications, but it's essentially not, the church is not essentially political. I would say, as with every pope, they're grounded in Christ, in the gospel, in the pursuit of helping people to live out the faith. So I see Pope Leo XIV really already articulating his sense of continuity with Pope Francis in terms of putting Christ front and center, calling all Catholics to be evangelizing witnesses of their faith in the world. Certainly a priority for the poor and the marginalized, certainly open to the world, wanting to engage the world in the proposal that the gospel gives us. So I see a lot of continuity, but as with every individual in a leadership position, he'll put his own stamp on his leadership style and his vision and his priorities. And that remains to be seen. He's only been Pope for less than 4 days.
That is true. You mentioned being a White Sox fan. We've wondered about whether he likes custard, of course, the Midwestern ties. But this is also a Pope who speaks 5 languages and is a naturalized citizen of Peru. What message does his background send to the world and to us here in Wisconsin?
Yeah, I would say he really has a universal perspective because of his mission background. He was prior general of his religious order, the Augustinians, which means he traveled the world. So he's seen the world and the church in very different cultures, conditions, languages. So it really gives him a broad perspective as leader of the 1.4 billion member Catholic Church as he looks at the whole world. And I think that gives him a very pastoral perspective as well. The fact that he's from the United States is really, in a way, a nod to the vitality of U.S. Catholicism and just the contributions that the U.S. Church brings to the global church and to the world.
You know, clergy sexual abuse cases have long plagued the Catholic Church, and survivors are also speaking out in the moment, worried the new Pope will not take a tough stance. What are you hoping he might do to steer the church in the right direction?
I think when you look at the Dallas Charter here in the United States back in 2002, Catholic Church instituted protocols and training and very institutionalized vigilance. So the number of cases in the last 20 years are very small. I mean, one is too many. But it shows that what we've done here in the States regarding child protection and vigilance has essentially worked. So I know Pope Leo XIV will be vigilant on this very disturbing matter, and just remind the Universal Church we still need to be persistent and vigilant in rooting out any clergy sexual abuse and creating an environment where that becomes impossible to happen. I mean, no, it's very difficult to happen, right? That we create a culture that's safe and nurturing for our children.
Bishop Hying, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you. God bless.
That is Bishop Donald Hying of the Diocese of Madison as we talk with him about the new Pope, Leo XIV. Now we turn to Sister Julia Walsh of the La Crosse-based Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration. She's part of her congregation's formation team, serving women who are thinking of joining the convent. And she hosts the podcast. It's called Messy Jesus Business. Sister Julia, welcome back to Wisconsin Today.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Kate.
Yeah, when we called you to come on the show, we interrupted your prayers. And I'm wondering, I know this is deeply personal, but what are you praying for with the new Pope?
Oh my, I am so thankful. I'm praying prayers of gratitude and awe. When I received the news that Pope Leo XIV was elected, that we have a US-born American Pope, I was surprised, I was amazed, I was excited. I don't think any of us expected it at all. and I also felt sort of, I was laughing. Found it sort of funny because I felt such a kinship with him. Quickly, I heard the biographers say that he's a graduate of Catholic Theological Union in Chicago, and I'm also a graduate of that theology school.
Wow.
So I think I never would have imagined that I could say to anyone that I graduated from the same theology school as the Pope.
How are your Franciscan sisters reacting to the news?
Oh, I believe we're all just so happy and thrilled and a bit on edge, right? To see what he's going to do. We have great hope and joy that he's going to continue to help the legacy of Pope Francis unfold, and he's going to continue to emphasize the need for peace and justice, for care, for creation, for the concerns of the earth, to try to stop climate change, to try to stop wars, to protect the most poor and marginalized and oppressed in society. I know he has a heart for the poor. And I've been reflecting these past few days about how it's really the poor people of Peru who made him into a bishop and into a cardinal. He went there as a missionary priest with the Augustinian order, and his relationship with the poor is what helped him to grow into an administrator, into a leader, into someone who can shepherd the 1.4 billion Catholics around the world. And this is so exciting for me.
Sister Julia, the new Pope will face more questions about women's role in the church, and he has voiced opposition in the past to the idea of ordaining female deacons. What are you hoping this Pope will do to potentially advance women's involvement?
Of course, I hope that he'll remain focused on synodality in his leadership. He was a participant in the Synod on Synodality, which means a special meeting that Pope Francis held to listen to the people of God throughout the world and hear their concerns, including on women's leadership in the church. Now, I love the complicated and beloved and broken Catholic Church. And the church, she moves forward slowly. She is always moving forward. Some people are concerned that the Catholic Church moves backwards or is seeming that way, but she always moves forward. The Catholic tradition is a living tradition. It's just that she doesn't move as fast as what we want. So I trust in God's providence and God's timing. I trust that things will move at the pace that the Holy Spirit wants for us.
How might this new leadership at the Vatican impact the work the Franciscan sisters do in La Crosse, if at all?
Oh, I imagine we'll follow him and the tone he sets for the church, much like we did with Pope Francis. In fact, one of Pope Francis's greatest encyclicals, a letter to the whole church, was called Laudato Si, Praise Be, which was about the sacredness of all creation and the call to protect the earth and the poor and the vulnerable, to stop pollution and to stop climate change. And that has totally directed our mission as Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration. And so I am eager to see what Pope Leo XIV's first encyclical we will be centered on, and how that could inform and direct and guide us as we establish our mission for the coming years. It's not lost on me that he is emphasized peace building and bridge building right away. And as the bishop said, he chose the name Pope Leo the 14th as a nod back to Leo the 13th, who was really the father of Catholic social teaching in his encyclical Rerum Novarum, which is about the rights of workers and the rights to unionize. So I suspect we will be guided by those principles of Catholic social teaching during this papacy as well.
Sister Julia, thank you so much for joining us.
It's been a pleasure and a joy. Habemus Papam, isn't it exciting?
Sister Julia Walsh is from the Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration in La Crosse. She hosts the podcast called Messy Jesus Business. And earlier, we heard from Bishop Donald Hying of the Diocese of Madison. In coming days, celebration masses for Pope Leo XIV will be held at churches across the country and around the world. In Milwaukee, Archbishop Jeffrey Grob will celebrate a Mass for Leo tomorrow evening at 6 at the Cathedral of St. John the Evangelist. Coming up on Wisconsin Today, a shipbuilder in Superior and a customs broker in Milwaukee navigate trade and tariffs.
We are all scrambling, primarily due to the pace at which these executive orders are being announced and being put into place. So there hasn't been a lot of time to react.
That's ahead on WPR News. It's Wisconsin Today. I'm Kate Archer-Kent. To restore American shipbuilding and bring down China's dominance, the Trump administration plans to impose new port fees on Chinese ships. The penalties come after an investigation during the Biden administration into China's maritime logistics and shipbuilding that found unfair trade practices. As trade tensions flare between the world's two largest economies, we look at it from the perspective of Great Lakes shipping and a busy shipyard. Patrick Kelly is CEO of Fraser Industries in Superior. The maritime company oversees Fraser Shipyards, which builds and repairs vessels of all sizes. Patrick, welcome to Wisconsin Today.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you for having me.
Fraser Shipyards in Superior dates back to 1890. Can you give us a brief tour of the yard? What ships you're working on right now on the dry docks, where those vessels are from?
Sure. We have both a repair side and a new construction side to Fraser Industries, Fraser Shipyard, and Lake Assault Boats today. On the repair side, we're a busy yard, especially January, February, and March. We could have up to 10, 11, 12 boats in on any given winter. Some on our dry dock, some simply dockside or elsewhere in the Duluth Superior Harbor Complex. And Great Lakers can come in any time of year for repairs, but typically concentrate around the winter months as they come off the water because of ice and weather. Year round, we also have an active new construction yard underway. We're building 4 vessels today, 4 contracts with the U.S. Navy. We have built vessels for each of the armed forces going back 5-6 years now, all except the Space Force, and we're still hopeful that someday we can get a Fraser component on something for our Space Force. So it's a busy place today. We do a lot of construction for police and fire boats as well. And we even manufacture a ski board and a wakeboard vessel as well.
Wow, wow. To me, it's a bit surprising that there is new construction of ships in the works because this is China's territory, right? The White House says that the U.S. builds 0.2% of the world's ships, compared to China's 74%. What is going on there?
Well, the vessels that we construct for the Navy and for others tend to be aluminum hulled. There are some that are steel hulled, but we are really building ships that are 200 feet or less in size. When you talk about the Chinese vessels being built, those involve competitors or competition for the Great Lakers that are on the water and that we repair regularly. And the Great Lakes is a battleground for Chinese-built vessels. Since 2010, approximately 19 or 20 or so vessels, Chinese-built, have made their way onto the Great Lakes as part of the Great Laker fleet. That's about 20% of the total vessels that move commodity product all over the Great Lakes today. So it's a sizable share just since 2010. We dug into this issue over the last 6 months, and you can strike a direct correlation of older vessels, typically U.S. built, but others as well, other countries as well, that are now sidelined or no longer operating on the Great Lakes. They could come back into service, but they're no longer operating because they've been replaced by these Chinese-built Lakers since 2010.
The U.S., meanwhile, will start charging fees on Chinese-owned and operated and Chinese-built ships that are arriving at U.S. ports. Can you describe what's going on there with these unfair practices that the federal government sees?
Well, that's certainly being discussed, right? It's not yet law, but it sure looks like it's coming. The Chinese have been subsidizing their ship construction industry for decades, and that's the heart of the matter. An unfair trade practice has been set up, and how the world responds to that. We have a president who has identified this as an unfair trade practice. It sure looks like it when you look at the market share that the Chinese have in global boat building today. And so taking a stand and responding to it. And the question is, how does the rest of the world respond? Shame on us for allowing the Chinese to establish that position, but it's really a question from here, what are we going to do about it? And I think that's what's being debated.
It seems like at Fraser, though, you're trying to look at all pieces of the industry, repair, new construction, other types of vessels. Is that a way to get a handle on the industry?
Well, we think so. And it's a function of where we're located. We have a terrific location on Lake Superior as part of the Duluth Superior Harbor Complex. We have 100 acres of owned property today on lakefront, deep water access. We only use about 15 or 20 acres of that today. So we have a tremendous capability to expand or take on new projects, whether for the U.S. military, the Department of Defense, or other industries that are emerging all over North America. We also have an underemployed workforce. We have great people. We could employ a lot more if we had year-round work other than just our January, February, March repair season. We took an informal poll this last winter with our union Boilermakers who would be interested in staying on and working 12 months out of the year if we could find the work. And about 350 or 400 people put their hands up and would like to continue working at the yard year round if we could find the work for them. So we've got a great workforce. We know we have construction people that could build infrastructure, about 1,200 construction contractors who are underemployed in the winter months between, say, October through May of each year. We could put them to work. We could build a bunch of this infrastructure and build larger vessels or more vessels as time goes on. So we have solutions here. We're a bit unique among shipyards. I think others on the Great Lakes are in similar positions. The shipyards on the East Coast, the West Coast, and the Gulf Coast have more constraints than we do. They're landlocked, they're maxed out in the way they can draw labor into those locations. I think it's time that we get thoughtful as a country and expand our manufacturing footprint back into the Great Lakes. We've been here since World War II. We built a lot of vessels then. We've allowed that to atrophy, and we have ourselves to ask why, but we know we can adjust and correct the situation as well.
Steel is usually the backbone of shipbuilding. It's the foundational material in many modern ships. How is the shipbuilding industry affected by the 25% tariffs on imported steel and aluminum?
Yeah, we buy American wherever we can. And as you know, Superior and Duluth handle the taconite, the precursor to steel manufacturing that goes on all over the Great Lakes. We would welcome expansion of U.S. steel manufacturing, more taconite moving through the Duluth Superior Harbor. We think we make a nice ecosystem, if you will, of additional manufacturing. We can put that steel to good use in building more boats. When we're not buying American, typically it's because our customers have requested a specific component from a particular vendor that can only be found overseas or offshore. We're always in discussions, though, with those customers to look for U.S. sourced components where we can and where we can be successful.
Do you think would additional fees on China make China any less powerful in the shipbuilding and the maritime industry?
I can't necessarily comment about what the Chinese might do with a tariff structure, but I can absolutely comment that with additional investment in U.S. shipyards, could include Canadian shipyards as well, other shipyards in Europe, we can get much better at building boats, build them much faster for lower cost. We can absolutely replicate what's gone on in China. We know how to build boats. We know how to do them, how to do it efficiently. It's a matter of investment from here that puts us on a level playing field with our world competitors.
We're in the midst of economic uncertainty and shifting economic conditions and policies. How do you, as a CEO, plan your budgets and projects in this era of unsteady markets and changing conditions?
It is a challenging time for sure, but there have been many challenging times in our past and our future as well. You touched on it earlier when you mentioned all the different things that Fraser does today. We repair boats, we build new, we work with steel, we work with aluminum. By being diversified and working in a number of different markets with a number of different customers, we think that's the winning way here to weather the storm, if you will, or persevere through uncertainty ahead. We've had uncertain past as well. The shipyard has been operating since 1890, as you referenced. We think diversification is the way to work going forward here.
Patrick, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Kate. I appreciate the opportunity.
That was Patrick Kelly, CEO of Fraser Industries in Superior, as we check in on Wisconsin's maritime industry amid ongoing tariffs and economic uncertainty. But it's customs brokers who are trying to keep pace with the calculations on duties and fees. Sandy Siegel is a licensed customs broker in Milwaukee and president and managing director of M.E. Day & Company. Sandy, welcome to Wisconsin Today.
Great. Thanks, Kate. I'm really happy to be here today.
You oversee imports crossing into the U.S., and then you're processing duties and fees on goods. Can you help us understand your day-to-day work with your international partners since the start of the White House's tariffs?
That's a loaded question, but I'll do my best. It's obviously been quite chaotic and since January, and in particular the last month or so. But our typical day-to-day, I'll start with that. We help our customers, which are both importers and exporters. But in regards to the duties, our customers are, buying goods from overseas. We help them with arranging the transportation from everywhere in the world and get the goods here, and then help them determine the correct duties to be paid, clear through other various government agencies like Food and Drug, things like that. But most importantly, in reference to all the tariffs and so forth, determining the proper classification and what duties apply, and arranging for payment to customs.
Sandy, has the changing percentage of tariffs on various global trading partners, has that impacted what customs agents, customs officials are trying to calculate?
Oh, absolutely. I think for all of us in the trade, both, private side customers, importers, us customs brokers, as well as customs themselves and the government, we are all scrambling a little bit, primarily due to the pace at which these executive orders are being announced and being put into place. So there hasn't been a lot of time to react and to plan, as well as to implement, right? And to audit and so forth. So U.S. Customs, has a responsibility to ensure the proper duties are paid and collected. And I was recently at a conference where the Assistant Commissioner of Customs spoke, and try to empathize with those of us in the audience that are all trying to keep up with the changes. What are they? And, how do we make sure we're assessing the right duties and so forth? And again, because of the rapid pace in which things are changing, the programmers in the industry, the computer programmers have been challenged to keep up, to make sure we're calculating the right duties. Customs has said loud and clear their software is not able to audit for it. So they're relying on the importers and us customs brokers to make sure we're calculating it correctly.
Sandy, you have seen so many years in this industry, and I imagine
Right.
you've gone through a lot in customs and trade over your 40-plus year career.
Yes.
Have you seen something like this before? What compares?
In some ways, many of us in the industry have said it's a little bit like some of the disruption we saw during the pandemic and then the supply chain meltdown that happened shortly after the pandemic. The way in which it's similar is, all of a sudden things were completely disrupted. And, during the pandemic, and trade stopped for a while, right, as the world shut down. And then it exploded, right, because we were all purchasing things and buying like crazy. Then, that caused freight rates to explode and escalate dramatically as the import volumes increased so quickly.
Mm.
The inability to plan or know what lies ahead, I think for, many of us in trade is similar in that regard.
Let's look at China now, in particular, with your clients. President Trump, as we talk, has imposed tariffs of at least 145% on Chinese imports. There's the 125% retaliatory tariff by China on U.S. goods. What is the situation now with your clients, and has trade nearly stopped with China? What do you see?
Yeah, China in particular has had such a dramatic impact, and we do handle quite a large volume out of China. A lot of customers, we had a great first quarter, and a lot of people over ordered and stocked up on inventory, of course, because they were anticipating the new tariffs with the administration. So now is when, we're really seeing it. So for importers, we have many importers that are, still producing out of China, and they've put freight on hold, and they're trying to write it out. They're hoping that there will be some negotiation, and that will at least drop down from, the 125%, which is again on top of other duties and the original 301 duties, but they can't hold on forever. So, they're just trying to buy some time. And, everybody predicts as inventories deplete, that at some point they're, we'll need to start bringing in those goods. But even some of our export clients have been impacted because of the retaliation, as you mentioned. They, obviously our goods are not as competitive if you're selling to China. and we've had a couple orders canceled by the customers in China. I have one customer here who makes some pretty, high value capital equipment, and they're moving the production to Canada so that they can produce the goods there, and it will no longer be a US made good, and they'll still be able to get the sale. And so, yeah.
That's huge disruption to supply chains. Where are these goods being held, or what does that mean for the goods themselves?
Yeah, goods are being held per se at the supplier's factory. So, in other words, not, holding the loading of goods and booking freight out of China. Even, Trump 1.0 and the original China duties and the objective of motivating U.S. companies to move production out of China, it's just not that easy to move entire supply chains, as I'm sure you can imagine.
So as you look out at those choppy waters, if you will, are importers or exporters, are they experiencing any benefits from tariffs in this moment?
I honestly, and without getting political, but I can honestly say I have not seen one company on either side, whether you're a manufacturer, a supplier, an importer, in any industry that has benefit. I can say that in all honesty, and there are situations I've seen that are really heartbreaking on smaller size companies that have frankly said this will put us out of business. And I can't see anyone in at least the short term that has benefited from these duties in either direction.
Sandy, thank you for joining us.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Kate. It's always a pleasure. Big fan, and thank you for having me on the show.
That was Sandy Siegel, a licensed customs broker in Milwaukee, president of M.E. Day & Company. Earlier, we spoke with Patrick Kelly, CEO of Fraser Shipyards in Superior. And a note, these conversations happened before the news this morning that the U.S. and China have temporarily agreed to slash tariffs while the two sides talk. Still ahead on Wisconsin Today, here's stories of two Wisconsinites who lost everything in disasters and how it changed their lives.
And it's funny how you look at some of the things that you literally had taken for granted for 20 plus years. That turns out to be the thing that you wish you had the most.
That's ahead on WPR News. It's Wisconsin Today. I'm Kate Archer-Kent. Recent months have seen a string of disasters around the country, including wildfires in California and New Jersey, floods in Iowa and elsewhere, and an active tornado season. Fortunately, losing a home in a disaster is still a rare occurrence, but climate change could be raising the risks in many communities. How do people cope with losing their home, and what do disasters teach us about our communities? We'll hear from two Wisconsinites who've experienced the loss of their homes. Nick Mortensen is an author and former comedian living in Green Bay. He lost his home in 2011 when his apartment building in Madison burned down. And Mike Perkins is the owner of Coon Creek Customs. It's a vintage and antique car restoration business in Coon Valley, Wisconsin. He lost his rental home and most of his possessions to flooding in 2018. They spoke with Rob Ferret last week.
Nick, let's start with you. Now, the apartment building you were in Madison, this is back in 2011, destroyed by a fire. No one killed in the fire, but 27 people, including you, lost their homes. Take us back to that day, if you can, and how you started to realize what you had lost.
We got knocks on the door around 4:30 in the morning. And it was fire department telling us building was on fire and we needed to leave. So they weren't waiting outside my door. They were just going to other doors. So I took a couple seconds and grabbed my my gym bag and my shower curtain, and I threw it over my computer. I just assumed it was be a small fire be put out, and I'd be back in there by the end of the day. I just didn't want smoke damage or anything on my computer. And so I just went. It was right in the Capitol Square. I had a gym. I went to work out at it. And by the time I came back from a workout, so hour and a half, 2 hours later, the other people in the building were kind of amassed in a parking lot next door and kind of pulled out some lawn chairs, and we're just sort of watching it, waiting to get back in. And then within 20 minutes, the landlord showed up and started handing us our deposit checks. And I thought, oh, this is going to be a long day. So that was when it first occurred to me that I may not be able to get back into my apartment.
And Mike, you were one of the many people who lost their homes in the flooding in western Wisconsin back in 2018. What sticks with you about that day?
Well, I guess the thing that sticks out the most is just you go to bed, and it was probably a little bit earlier than 4:30 for me, about 2 a.m. And you just, you're in water, and you just realize how quickly your whole world just changes. It's funny, Nick mentioned grabbing his gym bag. I did the same thing, grab a duffel bag, grab some bathroom stuff, toothbrush, that kind of stuff. Opened up the drawers as fast as I could, threw, whatever I could get my hands on in there, and then waited out. And, the water was chest high at that time. So, yeah, just how fast things can happen.
Now, Nick, you threw stuff in a gym bag. Apart from that, were you able to save any of your possessions?
It took us about 8 weeks after the fire to be allowed back in.
Oh, wow.
But we had a day where we could show up and grab what we could. So I was able to grab some stuff out of there. Unfortunately, it had been 8 weeks of water damage and smoke damage. So most of it wasn't savable, but I was able to get my computer out of there and, like a few other things. But for the most part, it wasn't savable. So it was a fascinating experience. I think of the 14 or so apartments in the building, only about 2 of us decided to show up on that day to sort of scavenge through what we could. So, and there was no real supervision. So I had about 8 hours to walk up and down those steps to my 3rd floor apartment and pull out what I could. And it was it's a pretty fascinating thing to just sort of sit among the destruction with no supervision. It was like a weirdest kind of playground you could ever imagine. So I was able to save just the computer and what I had in my gym bag and a few things, but nothing substantial.
Nick, you say fascinating. It sounds like maybe heartbreaking. And I'll speak for myself. I feel kind of attached to my stuff sometimes. And the thought of realizing this triage, or maybe there's a few things you could save, but the rest of it is gone. Sounds, I don't know, disturbing in some ways. How did you react to that?
Well, there was an 8-week interim there where they kind of at first sort of hinted that we might be able to get back in there. So I kind of had a long time to deal with it. I was, really looking forward to that day. It kind of hit me like a ton of bricks once I walked in there. That, boy, this is a much different environment than I thought.
And Mike, you got out as the waters were coming up. Again, you just threw stuff in a bag, grabbed what you could. Was it a total loss, the stuff left behind for you?
When I went back, I was able to go back, once the water went down, so a day later. But it was ironic that Nick, the fire thing, I was thankful that I didn't have a fire. When you have a fire, if something burns, it's gone. There's no restoration that you can do. There's no drying it out. It's just gone. And I remember trying to put light in it. It could be worse. I could have had a fire. And But yeah, most the only thing I salvaged out of there was the clothes. I was able to take them. I actually had a friend. She took them to the laundromat and washed however many loads of clothes. So all my clothes were saved. But yeah, otherwise I tried to keep some pictures. That's again, flood versus fire. I had pictures that I could salvage, but no, everything else, all the electronics, some of the paper or paper mache stuff that your kids made, that's all gone. It's just gone. And it's funny how you look at some of the things that you had taken for granted for 20 plus years and had maybe even no financial value. And then that turns out to be the thing that you wish you had the most.
Are there things attached to your kids that you miss in particular?
Yeah. I've processed it pretty good. But yeah, there's pictures, my son's name is Sean, so there's pictures that he drew, when he was in school, color crayon pictures, and you don't really have an appreciation. You do it first when they first give it to you, it's like 2 weeks of, but then, after 20 years go by, you think nothing of it, but you have it floating around somewhere, and then that's gone. It just turns out to be a soggy, crinkled up, unsalvageable piece of paper that really had no monetary value. And you, like I said, you didn't even think about it for 20 plus years.
We're talking about what happens when a disaster strikes, people lose their homes. We've got Mike Perkins, whose home was destroyed in floods in Vernon County in 2018, and Nick Mortensen, whose apartment building in Madison burned down back in 2011. I want to talk a little bit about community and support you did or didn't get with both of you. Let's start with you this time, Mike. Of course, this is flooding. It happened in a wider spread area. What did you see when it comes to community coming together? Whether that's just your friends or the wider community?
We are fortunate, and we live in an area in Wisconsin where everybody helps everybody out. When we have fundraisers, they almost, without exception, meet their goal. And so everybody, it was amazing. It was literally amazing. We were kind of locked into Bridge, which was the main way out of town, was destroyed or compromised enough that we couldn't use it. But it was just amazing. Some of the local stores, not to put a plug in for Quick Trip, but Quick Trip was amazing. Truckloads of bottled water, things that, the community was amazing. There were people, church groups that were just walking, it's obviously a village, so there's house after house after house, and they would just walk around a church group or volunteer group of 20, 30 people and help clean up the mess. And they just walked door to door. Just, things you would never think of. It was amazing. And then there were preachers from the church group and priests from the Catholic Church, and they would make a point to sit down with you and listen to something you had to get off your chest, or, just listen to you, just listen. So our community was amazing.
Nick, your situation was different and more localized, this one apartment building. Did you feel like you got support, again, whether from friends or family or people in the community?
Yeah, the apartment building was on the corner of East Mifflin Street and Pinckney, so right in the Capitol Square. And, as the residents of the buildings sat in the parking lot and watched everything go up, we got word from the Dayton Hotel that we would all be allowed to stay there for free for the next week to 10 days. I stayed at my girlfriend's house that night, but I checked in the next day, and they had an entire floor conference room that was filled with clothing that, within 24 hours, some of the fraternities and groups around UW-Madison had put together a clothing drive for us. And that was something that I, never expected. But boy, it meant a lot in that moment. I can tell you, great deal. I don't think I've ever been so touched,
Mike, do you see ways in which going through this experience with the flood changed the way you live your life?
Yeah, definitely. There's subtle changes. You appreciate walking in the park more. Because that stuff always comes back. You walk through the park and then you remember when the park was literally under 15 or more feet of water, and it was raging water. And so you walk through there, and every time you step in that park, you stop, and that just crosses your mind, and you have a better appreciation for church, community, neighbors you had, neighbors who you didn't even get along with, You get to see the softer side of that. Now when you run into that person, you might not be best friends yet, but there's a higher level of respect and appreciation for them, if that makes sense.
Definitely. Nick, how about you? To what extent was this life-changing for you?
Profoundly. I had, I'd spent a good amount of time in the previous year reading books about how to overcome adversity. I was teaching a course. When you're dealing with adversity and significant, it can become all-consuming, and you fail to see what's ahead of you. So I sort of, as I was watching the fire, I sort of mapped out a plan for what I would like to do for the next few months, and first thing on the list was, this is a major change in my life. Maybe I can make a few changes of habits that I don't necessarily like having. And I was able to quit caffeine. I had a pretty nasty caffeine habit, but it was all sort of structured into my day. I'd wake up, I'd go get it. And because of the interruption, I didn't have that routine anymore. So I was able to quit that. And then so that was pretty profound. And as I said, later on, I stayed at my girlfriend's house, and I came to find out that that evening I had knocked my girlfriend up. She's my wife now. So my plan was to stay in Madison, but we ended up moving back to my home in Green Bay. So I was, a bachelor, kind of a man about town, doing stand-up comedy. And one day, and then a couple of weeks later, I was back in Green Bay looking for a house, getting my life set up for this baby that was going to come in 8 months or so. So, my life's never been the same since. It's profoundly changed.
I can't compete with the girlfriend knocked up thing. I can't. She was very comforting that evening. Life altering. Congratulations, by the way.
We'll leave it there. Nick, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
And Mike, thanks for sharing your story.
Absolutely.
Mike Perkins is the owner of Coon Creek Customs. It's a vintage and antique car restoration business in the village of Coon Valley. He lost his rental home and most possessions to flooding in 2018. And Nick Mortensen is an author and former comedian living in Green Bay. He lost his home in 2011 when his apartment building in Madison burned down. They spoke with Rob Ferret last week. The world of amateur sports in Wisconsin is going through a change, and it's all about a three-letter acronym, NIL. Tomorrow on the show, we'll talk about a new decision by the State Interscholastic Athletic Association allowing high school athletes to enter in name, image, and likeness agreements, reaping potential financial benefits and incentives from perhaps a restaurant or body shop down the street from their high school. Give us your take on NIL with those athletes who star in your high school gyms and on the football field. Should they be able to sign deals? Email us at wisconsin.today@wpr.org, or you can call or text to get in touch. It's 888-642-0232. That's 888-642-0232. Wisconsin Today producers include Beatrice Lawrence, Courtney Everett, and Joe Tarr. Our technical directors are Tyler Ditter and Sarah Hopeful. Learn more about us at wpr.org/Wisconsin Today. I'm Kate Archer Kent. You're listening to WPR News.